Welcome to this explainer. Imagine, just for a second, that you were sitting in the executive chair of one of the world's most legendary brands. You've got decades of history, massive global reach, and a product that brings profound, simple joy to millions of people. Think about the sensory nostalgia of snapping off a square of your favorite chocolate, that instant comfort. It's a powerful legacy. But outside your boardroom window, a storm is brewing. Consumer habits are radically changing. Supply chains are under unprecedented stress from global events, and smaller, faster rivals are nipping at your heels. Your task? Save the brand from these modern existential threats.
And this brings us to a deeply fascinating core tension. Think about the sheer irony here. How exactly does a 200-year-old chocolate empire, a brand built entirely on classic, sugary indulgence and decadent sweet treats, survive the massive, unstoppable wave of the modern health food revolution? This isn't just about tweaking a recipe in a test kitchen somewhere. This is a classic corporate survival story. It's a high-stakes crisis where a legacy brand has to perform this crazy tightrope balancing act between honoring traditional indulgence and adapting to strict modern health requirements. And today, we're going to break down exactly how this pivot happens.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the global chocolate battlefield, look inside the Cadbury machine, uncover the sweet and bitter truth, track the modern consumer shift, and finally, break down the Nutri-Balance solution.
All right, Section 1, the global chocolate battlefield. Let's identify the monsters.
Before any company can fix its internal problems, it has to accurately measure the threats knocking at the door. And honestly, the sheer concentration of high-level threats facing the entire chocolate industry right now is absolutely staggering. When we look at a pestle analysis, evaluating all those macro factors, a terrifying collision becomes totally apparent. Health trends, climate change, and cocoa price volatility are literally maxed out at a severe 5 out of 5 impact level. Why is a 5 out of 5 so scary? Imagine your main ingredient essentially doubling in price because of unprecedented droughts right at the exact moment your core customers are actively deciding they want to eat less sugar. The whole industry is being violently squeezed from both ends at the same time. When you map those massive external pressures onto the day-to-day competitive landscape, the reality gets even more intense. The rivalry between existing companies is incredibly fierce. And crucially, consumers have immense power today. If your chocolate bar is perceived as too expensive or too sugary, they won't just settle. They'll instantly grab a high-protein, low-sugar substitute from the shelf instead. The suppliers, the farmers who are actually growing the cocoa, also hold significant power, mostly due to those climate-driven shortages we just talked about. In an environment defined by this kind of relentless pressure, there is almost zero room for error. One strategic misstep could be absolutely devastating. Okay, moving on to Section 2. Inside the Cadbury machine. Let's look under the hood at their internal engine. To really understand what Cadbury can use to fight back against this storm, we have to identify what makes them totally unique. We need to find the resources that are genuinely valuable, rare, inimitable, and non-substitutable. And right here is where we find their absolute superpower. Above everything else, their brand heritage hits every single mark. You simply cannot buy 200 years of consumer trust and multi-generational affection. It gives them a profound sustainable advantage that no modern health food startup could ever hope to copy. Couple that rare emotional connection with the massive financial backing and global distribution from their parent company Mondelez, and you have an incredibly resilient foundation to weather this storm. But having a massive, powerful engine doesn't necessarily mean you can turn the ship quickly. When we evaluate their internal structure, a glaring contrast emerges. On one hand, Cadbury wields massive strengths, sweeping global reach, top-tier marketing skills, and deeply rooted sustainability values. But their core weakness? A painfully slow response time to emerging health trends. It's the classic speedboat versus cargo ship dilemma. Because their global supply chain and manufacturing processes are so utterly massive, pivoting overnight is nearly impossible. They just don't have the agility of smaller startups who are happily making vegan snacks in local kitchens and adapting to TikTok trends in real time. Which brings us to Section 3, the sweet and bitter truth, the pivot point. If we benchmark Cadbury against heavyweights like Mars, Nestle, and Ferrero, the real friction point becomes crystal clear. Cadbury totally matches its fiercest rivals in raw brand awareness and global reach, but the real danger is in the health sector. Cadbury is noticeably lagging behind Nestle in its healthy product range. Why is falling behind here such a major red flag?
Because in a market where the shift towards health and wellness is an unstoppable 5 out of 5 threat, coming in second means you aren't just missing a trend, you are permanently losing market share. Nestle is already moving fast, and if Cadbury doesn't catch up immediately, a significant chunk of their modern consumer base is going to walk away for good.
So, when you weigh these towering historical strengths against their glaring modern weaknesses, a distinct path forward really emerges. It's a genuine eureka moment. We know the brand equity is there, and we know the reliance on high sugar and volatile cocoa is a massive liability. The exact lifeline the brand needs is obvious: a rapid, targeted expansion into healthy snacks and plant-based products. This isn't just a nice idea, it's a vital strategic shield designed specifically to counter the incoming wave of sugar regulations and climate-driven ingredient shortages. Let's dive into Section 4, the modern consumer shift, and figure out how to find that sweet spot.
Now, you can't just throw a healthy chocolate bar into the void and hope it miraculously works. You have to know exactly who is going to buy it. The demographics of chocolate consumption are shifting dramatically right now. While traditional families still just want a sweet, valuable treat for movie night, the massive growth potential lies elsewhere. Today, millennials are agonizing over this idea of balanced indulgence. They want a treat, but they definitely don't want the guilt. Gen Z is hyper-focused on ethical consumption, wanting to know the exact carbon footprint of their cocoa. And you have an entirely new sector of fitness consumers desperately looking for high-protein, functional snacks to fuel their active lifestyles.
To capture this changing base, a company has to be laser-focused. It's a strategic funnel. First, you segment out those exact growth groups we just talked about: millennials, Gen Z, and fitness consumers. Second, you target them aggressively by focusing strictly on the health-conscious premium buyer, basically ignoring the traditional mass market for this specific push. Finally, you position the new offering with a highly specific, undeniable message: healthy indulgence without compromise. This logical flow shows exactly how a brand can isolate a highly lucrative modern audience without diluting its core identity. Of course, this requires a delicate psychological balancing act. The brand needs to shift public perception significantly. Traditional Cadbury is universally perceived as an accessible, standard, mass-market indulgence. Beloved, sure, but heavily associated with high sugar. They needed to move from that starting point toward a premium, health-conscious benefit, all without alienating the core fans who still just want a regular chocolate bar. Enter the concept of NutriBalance. By introducing this distinct new sub-brand, Cadbury shifts its weight. NutriBalance is positioned specifically to bridge the gap between the rich history of what Cadbury has always been and the strict demands of what the modern market requires. Finally, Section 5, the NutriBalance solution. Let's look at the tactical execution. Let's break down the launch of this pivot, step by step, and just notice how airtight this response is. The product itself is low sugar, vegan, and high protein, directly tackling those health trends we identified earlier. The price is premium, which protects their profit margins against rising cocoa costs, yet it remains affordable enough for a daily routine. Place is crucial here. By expanding beyond traditional supermarkets into gyms and e-commerce, they aren't just changing what they sell, they are changing where the consumer interacts with their brand. Promotion aggressively targets Gen Z and millennials through TikTok and wellness influencers. The people driving this are dedicated brand ambassadors. The process ensures strictly sustainable sourcing to meet ethical demands, and the physical evidence wraps the whole thing up in highly visible, eco-friendly packaging. It's a completely holistic strategy. From a high-level strategic standpoint, this is textbook product development. Now, why does classifying it like this actually matter? Because jumping into a totally new market with a totally unrelated product is incredibly risky. Cadbury plays it brilliantly smart here. They are not abandoning their massive loyal audience. Instead, they're driving growth by introducing a new, healthier product line to the consumers they already have, consumers who are simply evolving in their daily habits. It is a highly calculated move designed to retain deep brand loyalty while simultaneously future-proofing the company against modern health regulations. So we've seen the sheer scale of the external threats squeezing the industry, from volatile climate changes to strict health trends. We've explored the towering 200-year-old strengths of Cadbury and their genuinely glaring modern weaknesses, and we've walked through the airtight tactical launch of the NutriBalance strategy. They are walking a razor-thin tightrope between a legendary legacy of sweet indulgence and a necessary future of functional wellness. But in an industry defined by incredibly high rivalry and skyrocketing ingredient costs, is this specific pivot going to be enough to truly secure the legacy of a 2-century-old empire? I'll leave that for you to decide. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.